to the war on Israel and its tangible impact here on the streets of Australia. What I'm about to speak about is distressing for all of us, but it's happening and it's important. Overnight, the most horrific news imaginable. The Israeli Defence Force discovered the bodies of 40 babies and young children. They'd been killed, some even beheaded. Babies found dead next to their cots. The shocking sight of babies and young children with their heads cut off meant that the soldiers who found them and recovered their bodies were seen crying and comforting each other. International media went to one kibbutz with the IDF to examine and record the carnage, and here is a snippet from that report.
Shayli Atari and her one-month-old baby escaped her home and survived by hiding in the kibbutz. Her husband, Yahav, disappeared.
Ma. Ma. Ma.
While we filmed, a phone call came. And the news she dreaded. Yahav is dead. This is the horror of war. The family have allowed us to show this so that everyone understands what it is like.
These Hamas terrorists targeted and mutilated the most vulnerable, pregnant women and tiny babies. Jacqueline Magnay in The Australian writes that the atrocities from the Kfar Azar, as well as Kibbutz Be'eri and Kibbutz Re'em, shows that the Hamas militants were intent on brutalising their mass murder spree to leave a deep psychological imprint on those left behind. She writes that in one harrowing image from Kfar Azar, a baby cot with a small dress on the top is drenched in blood. She writes that I-24 news correspondent Nicole Zedek said soldiers had told her that many babies were found next to their cots with their heads cut off. And her colleague, also at Kfar Azar, said we're talking about burned houses with entire families killed inside, women and children whose heads have been cut off. She said it's the apocalypse. Many bodies were still lying in the street. And here's Nicole Zedek breaking down as she describes what she saw.
David, it's hard to even explain exactly just the mass casualties that happened right here. In fact, the Israeli military says they still don't have a clear number, but I'm talking to some of the soldiers and they say what they've witnessed as they've been walking through these different houses, these different communities, babies, their heads cut off. That's what they said. Gunned down, families completely gunned down in their beds. You can see some of these soldiers right now comforting each other.
There truly are no words to capture the evil, the cruelty that would lead these barbarians to take the lives of innocent, tiny, beautiful babies. It is so evil that it's beyond comprehension, beyond belief. These are things you can never imagine people would do to other people. The Australian also reports that deeply worried families have been receiving phone calls from the mobile phones of their loved ones, only to hear men laughing. The Hamas terrorists then boasting about their kills and conquests on social media. It's disgusting. And then there's this Israeli couple who managed to save the lives of their 10-month-old twin babies by hiding them in a safe room. They managed to get their 10-month-old twin babies into that safe room just moments before Hamas terrorists broke down their front door. Itay and Haydar Berdichevsky were brutally murdered, but they'd managed to save the lives of their babies. And it's estimated that around 14 hours later, Israeli soldiers found their tiny twins who'd been left alone for all of that time. And the babies are now being cared for by their grandmother. And those young parents, just 30 years old, are now among 1,200 innocent Israelis who've been killed in this terrorist bloodbath. And 260 of these were young revellers at the Supernova Music Festival. And tonight, one young man who was there would join me live to tell the remarkable story of how he managed to escape. Channel 9 reporter Edward Godfrey went inside one kibbutz next to the Gaza border, and he said no one from this kibbutz has been seen since the attack.
Look, when walking through there were bodies all over the place. It was very, very difficult to see. The smell really stayed with you, and you could just see things abandoned and left where they had been. Cars had been shot up, set on fire. That on the road in, you could see cars there from people who had tried to flee. It's really, it's hard to kind of do it justice trying to describe what we saw and smelled and felt in that place.
14 Americans are among those killed, and so far, at least one Australian. Grandmother Galit Carbone was murdered in her home. Albanese today offering his condolences to her family. All of this trauma is being felt deeply in Australia, of course by the Jewish community here, but also by all Australians who are watching in horror at what's unfolding. The massacre on Saturday was the single day with the highest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. And there's been a sense that some of our political leaders don't quite understand the gravity of this and the way that it's moved and broken the hearts of the Jewish community here and right around the world.